in many sports, we see the women's game playing catch up to the men's form of the game in any sport, commercially, maybe on the pitch in some instances. However, the ladies went all the way in 2016, Rio, Olympic gold. What has been the knock on effect for the men's team having seen that success?
I guess I don't know if it creates more of a drive or if it's more obvious. Just commercially, it's huge. It was huge for us in the country. Have we taken advantage of that as a sport? No, not at all, especially in the league, which is disappointing coming from a player in the league. There's still no real drive to get it on air, whereas so if you look at the Dutch league, if you look at the Belgian league, if you look at the German league, more and more are getting media. Beeston in the UK have really pushed it. All Georgians have started to push it, which is great because it's basically you either have to follow them or get left behind, and nobody wants to get left behind at this stage. So sadly, I don't think we capitalised on what could have been a real game changer in terms of where the sport could have been commercially in terms of professionalism. But they raised the profile hugely. But I guess from a men's point of view, it's just trying to emulate and get to that level as well. I think if we can get to a point where we're pushing medals in every single tournament, I guess that's where any team wants to get to. It's just the girls I think the women made it more obvious by how disappointing the men did in comparison, which is obviously results. You can look at that results driven or culture driven or however you want to look at it. At the end of the day, the men's team didn't perform anywhere to the level that the women did. So,
what have you seen or heard or understand that the women's team structure had that the men's team didn't? Why did one go all the way and one didn't?
That's a tough question.
Sorry.
You're not really sorry because you want an answer. If I'm perfectly honest with you, I don't really know. The women seem to have an incredibly cohesive group, whereas I don't think the men did. And I think when the going was good, the men's had it covered up a little bit, whereas I think the women basically went through a period of crap performances and their culture stayed the same or it held together, and I think that's when you know a culture is really in a good place. So recently, for our games out in the Pro League, so we played 4 and lost 4, which you can question, but what we had at the end of the trip was a hot debrief that was incredibly open, where everything was off the chest as a playing group, as a culture, and it was a pretty cool place to be when you're sat there and you know something's not perfect, but I wouldn't say our culture was bad, and I'd genuinely say it was very good at that stage as well in terms of the way people went about it, in terms of the questioning and the decisions and the conversations that were had. Incredibly open, incredibly, what's the word I'm thinking of? It wasn't polite as such as blunt, if that makes sense. So it was the in-between, I don't know what the perfect word for that is, but it was not mincing your words, but at the same time, it wasn't to the detriment of what you were trying to get across. It was actually, it's probably the best way to describe it. It was just a really respectful, open atmosphere where people who don't say as much had the opportunity to basically release what they were thinking. It's funny, isn't it? Like if someone speaks all the time, sometimes it becomes a bit, not that bothered. Like you kind of just zone out of it. Whereas what we had was actually people who don't say much in front of the group, but will have smaller conversations, actually start opening up a bit more in front of the group, and that's a fantastic place to be because then you know someone's comfortable, and everyone knows that everyone's got everyone's best opinions at heart. Like everybody wants to look after each other, but as a group we need to get ourselves to a different level. And it was a pretty open and honest conversation. It was pretty cool to see, and I can imagine that's what happened with the women's group in Rio when they needed it prior, And then actually come the tournament, actually what they had was a fantastic framework with a great group and a great coaching staff, and kind of everything came together harmoniously, whereas in the men's side it just didn't.
Do you think you may look back one day and feel that the Tokyo journey started at that meeting?
I started well before, but I think that's also, I think what was good about the meeting we had was that it was after a period that we had a great training block, so we thought we were in a really good place pre-games, then played the 4 games and then came out and said, do you know what, lads, it was a good training block, wasn't great because we now know where the bar is. But what we had was a 9-month block where we thought the bar was at a certain level, and actually what it is it's a lot higher. So whilst it was good, we've set an all right platform, there's still a lot of movement needed. So I think is it a turning point for us? I'd like to think so, in terms of results. Culture is good, but there's definitely a need to drive standards, which is what's happened over the course of the last few weeks, which is really good to see.